It's been that favorite time of day. We're finally going to finish Bet on a Cowboy by Julie Benson. So, everybody's like going either yay or oh, I'm going to miss it. I'm in the middle. I'm going to kind of miss it, but yet it's been a great read. And I like books that keep me on my edge of my seat and make me wonder, is he going to choose the ugly duckling or is he going to be falling for a beautiful swan, as usual? Page 259. Stay calm, Griffin instructed, his voice level but stern. Reach down and pick up the reins. I can't. I'll fall. Instead, Olivia leaned forward and wrapped her fingers in the mare's mane. The horse shook its head, trying to get out of the death grip. Ginger is a sweet girl. She's not going anywhere. Griffin maneuvered his horse beside Olivia's and reached for the dangling reins. Then his mount swerved, bumping into the other animal. Ginger whinnied and tried to skitter out of his reach. Help me, Olivia's shrill voice combined with her yanking on the mane made the mare even more nervous. Everything's fine as Griffin scooted closer and reached for Ginger's reins. Yet again, Olivia lunged for him, grabbing his shirt. His horse, unnerved by the sudden movement, bit the other animal, then reared. Let go of him, Maggie yelled. He tumbled to the ground, landing in a heap. Page 260. Griffin, she cried. Maggie vaulted off her horse. Griffin hadn't moved. What if he hit his head on a rock? People died from head trauma. She told herself not to panic. He hadn't hit a tree or fallen down the mountain. He'd be all right. When she knelt beside him, she pressed a finger to the vein in his neck, finding a pulse throbbing strong and steady. As she said a rushed prayer of thanks, the second cameraman joined her. Shut that thing off, Maggie ordered. She nodded towards Griffin's date, who'd somehow managed to stay in her saddle. Are you okay? I'm fine, but how's Griffin? His pulse is strong, but he's unconscious. Maggie turned toward the cameraman. Olivia, take the reins and lead her back to the ranch. As they left, Maggie pulled out her iPhone, but realized she hadn't programmed the numbers for any of Griffin's family. Remembering his concern for his mother's health, Maggie said to the remaining cameraman, return to the ranch. Don't tell Griffin's mom what happened. Tell Rory if you can't find him, find his sister Avery. Now go. Page 261. Damn, you're a bossy woman. Maggie closed her eyes in relief. Nothing had ever sounded better than Griffin's wisecrack. Thank God you're awake. Do you hurt anywhere? I can't feel my legs. His usual strong voice rattled with fear. Griffin's words pounded in Maggie's ears. Remain calm. Don't fall apart. Don't let him see how worried you are is what she's thinking. Stay still. You'll be okay. Her hand was shaking. She dialed 911 when the dispatcher answered. Maggie fought to keep her voice steady. We need an ambulance at the Twin Creeks Ranch. She looked over at Griffin. Where are we? Maggie relayed the information that they were on the short western trail about a mile or so in and continued answering the dispatcher's questions. Yes, Griffin was conscious and alert, but he had been out for a couple of minutes. When she asked about his injury, she bit her lip as she fought to harness her emotions. He can't feel his legs. Don't move him. An ambulance is on the way. After ending the call, she glanced at Griffin. Page 262 and 263. His face was pale and drawn, and he looked vulnerable and shaken. Help is on the way. I bet by the time you get to the hospital, the feeling will have returned to your legs. He grabbed her hand, lacing his fingers with hers. No, it won't. After the car accident, the doctors told me if I ever fell again, I could end up permanently paralyzed. What? How could that be? He could have forgotten to mention that. How could he have forgotten to mention that bit of information? Maggie forced herself to push aside her irritation over his bull-headed pride. Now wasn't the time to deal with that issue. She refused to acknowledge the possibility he might not walk again and wouldn't allow him to either. I think the key word in your statement is could. That means that you could just as well walk out of the hospital. I'm lying here injured and you're lecturing me. Will you ever cut me a break, woman? That's the man she wanted to see, the one who gave as good as he got, as she dished out. Probably not. What fun would that be? So not only are you lecturing me, you're getting pleasure out of it. His eyes flickered again. She squeezed his hand. Don't you dare fall asleep on me. That would be rude even for you. She needed to keep him talking about, but what about? Not his rodeo career. That would upset him. How about his family? She thought of the photo shoot and what he'd said about Rory and his job. You said your brother complained about modeling, but you thought it was easy. Tell me about that. I've never had as much fun as I did the couple of days they shot that commercial here. Griffin laughed and then grimaced. He proceeded to tell her how his camera-shy brother had filmed a commercial with the whole town watching. Periodically, when Griffin's voice started to fade, she squeezed his hand and asked another question. When they exhausted that topic, he asked about her brother. She told him she didn't see them that often because they had busy lives. Though they emailed and texted each other, she'd been pretty much on her own since their mother's death. Agonizing long minutes later, the paramedics arrived, carrying a backboard Rory with them. "Heard you took a fall," the dark-haired EMT said as he knelt beside Griffin. "I'm tired of getting called out to Twin Creeks because something happened to one of you McAllisters." 262, 263, 264. "Brandon, it's the damnedest thing. I landed hard, but I didn't hit anything. That shouldn't cause any real damage, yet I can't feel my legs." The paramedic slipped off Griffin's jacket, shoved up the shirt sleeve, and placed blood pressure cuff on his arm. "Leave it to you to find a way to get hurt." Now that Maggie had moved away from Griffin, chills chased through her. She wrapped her arms around her middle to ward off the cold. As the paramedics checked Griffin's vitals, panic returned to his eyes when he glanced her way. Not wanting to worry him, she flashed him a bright, hopefully reassuring smile. In her mind, she thinks, "Please let the paralysis be temporary." What would he do if he couldn't? She bit her lip and forced herself to think positively. "He's tough," Rory said as he stood beside her. "From what I hear, that's a family trait." Maggie swiped her hand over her eyes. "Did Olivia make it to the ranch?" "I had the cameraman drive her back to the cabin." "How's your mom handling the news?" "Griffin told me she has cancer. She's worried, but she's holding up." "I am so sorry about this. If I had known that the doctor said It's not your fault. I told Griff this morning it was a bad idea, but he blew me off with my concerns." She glanced to where Griffin lay. A paramedic slipped a neck collar on him, then the EMTs worked to slide him on the bright yellow backboard. He looked oddly fragile as they fastened the straps to keep him in place, fragile and frightened. 264 and 265. Griffin woke up in the hospital, his head feeling fuzzy with a sick sense of deja vu. Groggily, he focused on his body, his shoulders and neck arched, but he could move them. Cuts and scrapes marked his arms, but they worked fine, too. He twisted from side to side, and some of his panic receded. Everything above his waist seemed okay. Then he tried to move his legs. Nothing. His heart pounded as a fear spiraled through him. He still couldn't feel his legs. 266 and 267. Anger washed over him at life's unfairness. He'd given up the rodeo career. Wasn't that enough? This shouldn't be happening. He hadn't been chasing around a mountain at breakneck speed. A bull hadn't thrown him. He hadn't fallen on anything that should have caused major damage. Would the paralysis be permanent this time? What little life he had was probably shot to hell. The door swung open. His mom walked in, her eyes red and swollen. She rushed to his bedside and clutched his hand. He read that bad news in her gaze, but asked anyway, "What does the doctor say?" "Right now you need to rest, save your strength. You can talk to the doctor later." "Mom, tell me what he said. I have the right to know." "We won't know the extent of your injury until the swelling goes down. He's scheduled you for an MRI, but the swelling and fluid could mask any damage to your spinal cord." "Does he think I'll walk again?" "He said there's no way to know, but it's not uncommon for someone in your case to get partial or almost all full recovery." "But what if there's more than just swelling? What if it ended up with permanent spinal cord damage?" His heart sank. Since quitting the rodeo, he hadn't helped the family much financially, but now they might have to hire a ranch hand to replace him permanently. He could become a complete burden. The reality of what his life would be crashed into him. He thought giving up the rodeo had been hard. That was nothing compared to the facing life in a wheelchair. "Mom, I want to be alone." "Griffin Ryan McAllister, don't you dare give up." Her use of his full name meant she was spitting mad. He managed a weak smile. "I'm not giving up, Mom. I'm just tired. I've always been able to tell when you're lying, and now's no different." He couldn't muster up the energy to deny her assessment. "One thing I've learned fighting cancer is that staying positive is 50% of the battle. If you give up, your body will too, and I didn't raise a quitter." 266 and 267. 268. The first thing this morning, Nanette had updated on Griffin's condition. The doctors couldn't tell whether he'd been permanently paralyzed or not until the swelling went down. She added that Griffin didn't want the finalists to visit. According to Nanette, he said there were enough people hanging around, counting the ceiling tiles and playing Angry Birds. He didn't need more. After her call, Maggie relayed the information to Stacy and Olivia. They both been genuinely concerned for Griffin, but within 5 minutes their questions turned to how this would affect them and the finale. Maggie explained that everything depended on Griffin's prognosis, even though she wanted to scream at them for their self-centered attitudes and lack of real compassion. That unpleasant task done, and feeling mentally and physically exhausted, Maggie had given in the need for the nap. Now somewhat refreshed, she decided to tackle the next chore on her to-do list, call her producer. Mark, I need to apprise you of what happened yesterday. The vision of Griffin tumbling to the ground flashed in her mind, bringing it with the raw fear that she felt. She bit her lip until she regained control of her emotions. Griffin and a finalist went horseback riding. Her horse got spooked and she couldn't control the animal. In trying to help, Griffin fell. Is he okay? As of this morning, he couldn't feel his legs, but his life is not in danger. Tell the family we'll pay for anything insurance doesn't cover, and tactfully remind Griffin that he signed a liability waiver. His actions saved the bachelorette from being injured, possibly seriously. If the silly woman hadn't grabbed Griffin and refused to let go, everything would be fine. Good thing Maggie and Mark weren't talking in person, because in her current mood she'd hurl everything within reach of his head. She knew business churned not on no matter what, but the producer's detachment bordered on robotic. I'm thinking that we should postpone the finale, Maggie said, knowing that what Mark would say. It's over 2 weeks away. Let's wait and see what happens in the next few days. If Griffin's doctors give the okay, we'll go with the finale as scheduled. In fact, if he's in a wheelchair, it could be a real ratings buster. That's 268, 269, and here's 270. Crass ratings. Bad word. Sorry. A click in the Maggie's ear indicated another call was coming in. Thankfully for the excuse to end the conversation, she told Mark she would keep him updated. Maggie Nanette's voice broke over the line as soon as she answered. I need you to come to the hospital. Page 271 and 272 and 273. It's quite a fun-filled time. Griffin's doing a little better physically. The doctor said the swelling has gone down and he wiggled his toes today. If Griffin's improving, why do you sound so worried? Maggie asked. He's not doing well emotionally. He's giving up. I see it in his eyes. I don't know what I can do. Come to the hospital and we'll talk, Nanette pleaded. I'll be there in 10 minutes. When Maggie walked into the medical facility, she felt like skipping through the hallway. Griffin could move his toes. That had to be a good sign. She prayed he would continue to improve and that he'd be walking soon. When she reached the information desk, Nanette stood waiting and led her to a cluster of chairs in a nearby corner. I'm worried about Griffin. I've never seen him so down, not even after his first accident. It sounds like he's dealt with a lot over the last few years, and now this. It was all Maggie's fault. If she hadn't suggested horseback riding, Griffin would be fine, and now instead of lying in that hospital bed. That's just it. He's not coping. He's shutting everyone out. I don't know what will happen if he gives up. What could she do? Griffin hadn't listened to any advice she gave him, especially since they met. If anything, he didn't offer he often did the opposite to spite her. I don't think my talking to him is a good idea. In case you haven't noticed, we disagree a lot. My seeing him would only make him angry. That's exactly what I'm counting on. He needs someone to slap him upside the head. You can make him feel something, and anger's as good as a place to start. No matter what you say, I know there's something special between the two of you, and he won't shut you out. We're good friends, but... Nanette waved her hand in the air, dismissing Maggie's token denial. All you're doing is wasting your breath. I've seen my son around more women than I can count, and he's never treated one of them with respect and reverence as he does you. For a second, Maggie gave in to the thrill of hearing Nanette's words, but then she remembered how Griffin had acted on his last date, the way he kissed Stacy and hadn't looked like torture. If you think that, then you haven't seen him making out with the finalists. Nonsense. That's all for the show. Griffin's different than my other two children. They both wear their hearts on their sleeve. Griffin always kept what he felt under wraps. When I watch you together, I see him being himself. He opens up to you. He trusts you. And she thinks in her mind, and I betrayed his trust in the worst way possible start that phrase again. And I betrayed his trust in the worst way imaginable by lying to him about the baby. Nanette took Maggie's hand in hers. I need to talk to Griffin. Something tells me that you can get through to him. I can't. Surely if the family... We've all tried. He got so mad at Rory he tossed the water pitcher at him. My oldest son has a black eye to prove it. Griffin yelled at Avery, and of course she yelled back. When the nurses got complaints from the other patients, they ordered her to leave. With me, he won't even say anything. 272, 273, 274. Even if Nanette was wrong about their relationship, what if Maggie could pull him out of this funk? Didn't she owe it to Griffin to try? Tears welled up in his mother's eyes. The doctor wants him to start physical therapy, but he's refusing. If he's ever going to walk again, he has to go. Please. You have to try. I don't know what else to do. Griffin ignored the knock. The doctors and the nurses all knocked and then barged in. No action meant he had a visitor. If he pretended he was asleep, maybe whoever it was would go away. He suffered enough from his family's pep talks, their poor Griffin looks, and their excitement over him being able to move his toes. So what? The doctor still couldn't guarantee he'd walk. After the third knock, he snapped, "Get lost." The door swung open and Maggie stormed in, her soft hair bouncing against her shoulders. The fire in her eyes told him she was spoiling for a fight. She looked too good for words. He longed to charge across the room and pull her into his arms, but he couldn't. He physically couldn't. "Go away. I'm not up for having visitors." When she stood there as if she intended to put down roots, he reached for the call button. "If you don't leave, the nurse will throw you out. Want to bet?" "They made Avery leave yesterday. That was because you two were disturbing other patients. You won't get me to lose my temper. Plus, your mom sent me in here to talk some sense into you. So she's got my back. The nurses aren't tough enough or foolish enough to take on Nanette." "Fine. Mom wanted you to talk to me. You have. Now get the hell out of my room." "We acted out this routine the first time we met. I'm persistent now as I was then." Maggie took off her coat, walked to the chair beside his bed, and tossed the garment there. She continued on to the window. "This room's like a cave." She threw back the drapes, opened the blinds, and light splashed in, making his eyes water, reminding him how bright life was, for those outside. That was 272, 273, 274, 275, 276, and 277. "Close them. I like it dark in here." "Too bad. I don't." She flashed him a perky smile. "I hear you wiggled your toes today, and that's a good sign. Tomorrow I'm going to sign up for a marathon." "Don't be a smartass. You should. Be thankful. That's more than you could do yesterday, and who knows how much more you'll recover if you get your butt out of that bed and go to physical therapy tomorrow. There's no guarantee I'll regain use of my legs. For the sake of argument, let's say that you don't. Are you going to sit there and wallow in self-pity, or are you going to do something with your life? Easy for you to say with a college education and functional legs. What do you suggest considering my resume? My past work experience consists of bull riding and working on a family ranch. I don't have a college degree. How far will that take me?" "You can change that. What was your favorite subject in high school?" "Academics weren't my thing. I was more into athletics. Hitting the books was Rory's style." "Then change that. You're a smart man. I bet the only reason you didn't do well in school scholastically was because you never really tried." Her bullet shot through him, tearing through his regrets. How did she see what no one else did? Get out. 276, 277. "You try so hard to convince everyone that you don't care, but I know that's not true. You act the way you because it's safer for you not to try than if things don't work out. You say you never cared." She sank into the chair beside his bed. "This is the only life you get, and you can either live it up or curl up in a corner. Which is it going to be?" How dare she waltz in here and say things like that to him? "You don't know what it's like to wonder if you'll ever walk again. Rodeo was the only thing I was good at, the only thing I wanted to do. You don't know what losing that feels like." "Then teach and mentor the next crop of bull riders. You could start a camp on the ranch." "How could I teach anyone if I can't ride?" "Find someone who can. How about a retired bull rider? You can explain what he's doing and how he could improve. Come to my rodeo school and learn from a cowboy in a wheelchair who will never won any nationals. Students will be lining up to register for that." "Then do something on TV. You're a natural. You could do an interview for rodeo cowboys. How many hosts have you seen in wheelchairs?" She pointed to the folded up and leaning against the far wall. "I have two things to say to you. First, you don't know that you'll be in a wheelchair when you're released from this hospital, much less forever. I did some research on paralysis. You may not know the extent of your injuries until 6 to 8 weeks from now. Quit thinking about what you can't do and focus on what's possible. 2, it's time to give up the pity party. It's not attractive or productive." "I don't give a damn if it isn't." Maggie stood, arms crossed, anger flaring in her eyes. "If you don't care about yourself, then you should care about your mother. She's battling cancer, which is life-threatening. She shouldn't have to worry about you refusing to go to physical therapy. Every ounce of energy she focuses on you is one that she isn't available to fight her disease. How dare you be so selfish?" Maggie's words about knocked him over, instantly putting things into perspective. He'd started this insanity to give his mother the best chance to beat her cancer. He'd been willing to go on a TV show to find a wife just to get money for his mom needed so he could end up So how could he give up now? Your underwear is sure in a bunch today. Pink-cheeked, her eyes sparkling with venomous and passion, Maggie stood with her hands on her hips, looking as if she could take on the world as she fought to keep him from giving up on himself. He loved when she looked like this, all fire and fever. The thought swirled in his mind. He loved when Maggie looked like this. No, he was wrong. He pretty much loved Maggie, no matter how she looked. If she thought he could make something of himself, how could he give up? For once he saw possibilities in front of him. I'll agree to go to physical therapy under one condition. You have to be there as my cheerleader, complete with the outfit and pom-poms. You can't be serious. Maggie girl, would I kid about something like this? 278, 279, 280, 281, 282, and 283. Where would I find a cheerleader's uniform? As luck would have it, Avery still has hers from high school. Your brother's a pain in the ass, Maggie said to Avery when she stepped out into the younger woman's room. What's he done now? Avery plopped down on her bed while Maggie headed for the armchair in the corner. The room suited Avery's decoration in greens and tans with a sleek contemporary furniture. The space was calm and graceful like its occupant, though the surroundings failed to dampen Maggie's annoyance. Yesterday she considered telling Griffin about the baby in hopes that knowing he'd be a father, would encourage him to do whatever necessary to walk again, but she held off. What if he panicked over responsibility of parenthood? What if finding out about the baby only added to his worries? She couldn't take that risk. I made a bargain with him so he'd go to physical therapy. He was so stubborn and whiny that I really let him have it. I said he needed to go for your mom, that she had enough worry without him making it worse. The next thing I knew, he was all smiles and said that he'd go on one condition, so I need to borrow your high school cheerleading uniform. The words just rushed out in one breath. Avery flopped back on her bed, giggling. Don't tell me his condition was that you wear a cheerleader uniform, she nodded. Avery's laughter was harder, and Maggie was giving in to this ridiculous situation and laughed with her. That's so like Griffin. His sister stood, walked to her closet, and flung open the door. But what I don't get is why you agreed. She'd have done anything this side of legal to get Griffin to start therapy. Heck, she'd consider things that weren't legal. Your mom is so worried about him. She counted on me talking him into going to physical therapy, so in a moment of insanity I agreed to wear the get-up. I'm an idiot. Avery pulled out the box from the shelves and searching until she found her uniform. The minuscule purple and white skirt she handed over would barely cover Maggie's butt cheeks. Pair that with the tiny tank top and reveal a lot more than she cared to. She swallowed nervously. I can't wear that. I'll get arrested for public indecency. And if by some chance I make it to the hospital, men in white coats will haul me off to a padded cell. 280, 281, 282. Avery reached back into her closet, this time retrieving a trench coat. Wear this. I still can't believe I agreed to this. You don't have to go through with it. Maggie shook her head. If I back out now, he's pig-headed enough that he will refuse the therapy, and I can't risk that. With a cheerleader outfit clutched in her hands, she dropped the chin to her chest. Griffin will never let me live this down. Teasing me was his favorite sport, and I'm giving him ammunition for a lifetime. You really don't get it, do you? Avery stared at her, a big grin on her face. Obviously not. He looks at you like, I can't even describe it except to say I hope one day a man looks at me like that. I'm starting to think being delusional is another McAllister family trait. Think what you want, but denying it won't change reality. He's in love. He'll think you look beautiful. Now let's see how you look in that uniform fits. Page 283. The door burst open, banging against the wall. Maggie stalked into the room wearing a trench coat, her hair in a ponytail again, though this time she left a few strands loose, floating around her face. He never got tired of looking into her wide green eyes. With pom-poms clutched in her fist, she marched to his bed. After dropping them, she yanked off her trench coat, threw it on the closet closest chair. She stood before him in a short purple and white cheerleader skirt, skimpy tank top. Griffin glanced at the door, surprised a nurse hadn't flown into his room because his blood pressure and pulse must have spiked on the meter. Oh, these two. Page 291. A knock sounded on his door after he called. Come in. Stacy, the assistant director, and the cameraman strolled into the room without Maggie. Griffin, I've been so worried. The actress rushed over, tears in her eyes, and knelt in front of him. Talk about an entrance. Stacy was nice enough and fit well enough into his plan, but she didn't make him laugh. She didn't make him think that he could take on the world. "It's good to see you," he told her. After she settled into the chair beside him, she reached into her purse, pulled out a tissue, and blotted her eyes, then clasped his hand between hers. Paper scratched against his palm. She slipped him a note. His gaze met hers. At first, when she shook her head, he thought he imagined it. Then her eyes pleaded with him. What the hell was going on? After 15 minutes of chatting, holding hands, and playing the besotted boyfriend, he couldn't stand the charade anymore. Claiming he needed a rest, he sent her off with a kiss, and that left him feeling surprisingly disloyal. When the door shut behind everyone, Griffin opened the note. "We need to meet alone. I've got a business deal to propose that will benefit us both. Get a message to me once you leave this hospital about where and when we can meet." What the hell did that mean? 291 and 292. Moving forward. Page 298 and 299. And more. "You haven't been coming to see me. I've had to endure physical therapy without my cheerleader." She waved her hand. "It doesn't appear that you have hurt your progress. Why didn't you come back?" The plea in his voice almost pulled the words out of her. She was thinking, "I love you too much to bring financial disaster down on you and your family." She couldn't do that. Not when Nanette was fighting cancer and so many medical bills. "I've been busy dealing with the details of the final finale." She smiled, trying to lighten the mood. Excuse me. "Which is what brings me here. We need to talk about when you're ready to shoot the last episode. Before we deal with the business, I have something for you." He awkwardly made his way to his dresser, and on top of it sat a white box with a green ribbon. Box in one hand, cane in the other, he worked his way back to her. He bought her a present. Her brothers and friends gave her gift cards for her birthday, but when was the last time someone took the time to pick out a gift for her, especially for no reason? Probably not since her mother died. Her mom used to buy her little things like inexpensive earrings or a necklace, and they say, "They made me think of you." 298, 299, 300. She's thinking, Griffin bought me a gift. But what if word got around, someone suspected the truth about them? That could lead to the unemployment line for her and the lawsuit for Griffin. Folding her hands behind her back, she wouldn't grab the box out of his hands. "I can't accept this." Confusion followed by disappointment flashed in his beautiful eyes. "Consider it an early Christmas present." Her palms itched. Nothing expressively prohibited her from receiving gifts from the show's cast, and refusing the offer seemed silly. After all, she and Griffin had shared. She glanced along the hallway. If no one saw him give her the present, what the harm could it do? It could be their little secret. She's thinking in her mind, "Don't you have enough of those?" Exactly, so what would one more matter? Her hands shaking, she reached for the box, and for a second she simply held it. Then she untied the ribbon and pulled the lid off. Peeling back a tissue paper revealed an emerald green sweater. "The moment I saw this, I thought of you and how it would bring out your gorgeous color of your eyes." Page 301. He hadn't just bought a gift. He'd seen something and thought of her. The realization left her weak in the knees. Maggie inhaled and counted to 10. He couldn't know how much his gesture meant to her. "Thank you for the sweater." She swallowed hard, but move on to business, to safer ground. "Before we all leave for the holiday break, I wanted to discuss whether or not we need to change the finale date. The doctor says there's no reason I can't shoot the show as scheduled. That's what I want to do. I'm ready for the taping to be over." Though she thought the same thing, hearing Griffin say that he wanted the season to be done and cut through her. She hoped he wouldn't be so anxious to get rid of her. In her mind, she's thinking foolish, hopeless romantic. She smiled, probably too brightly, but if she didn't smile, she'd cry, "Great! When we get back in 2 weeks, we'll shoot the finale." 2 weeks. Then Griffin would be out of her life. Page 306, 307, 308, and 309, and more. Nanette cleared her throat. "I've never said anything negative when you brought a girl home. When I figured there wasn't much point, because chances were I wouldn't see her any more than twice. But this time I have to say something. We're concerned." Nanette waved her hand around the table in a sweeping motion. "You're not in love with either of these finalists. You need to put a stop to this nonsense." "It doesn't matter, Mom. No one expects relationships from the reality shows to last, so it won't be a surprise in a few months when we break up. What about the woman you proposed to? What if she sees things differently?" Worry lines creased in her mother's forehead. What was worse for her health, that her concern over what she thought he was doing or knowing the truth. It's complicated, Mom. Life always is. If anyone tells you differently, he's a liar. And if you believe him, you're a fool. She glared at him with a look only a mom could deliver after years of practice. I didn't raise any fools. We all know you're in love with Maggie, Avery blurted out. That's none of your business, and I won't discuss Maggie with you. Griffin clenched his hands together under the table. This is my life, not yours. Elizabeth stood. Since this is getting a little heated, and I'm neutral, I'll leave the rest of you to duke it out. After kissing her husband, she walked around the table to Griffin and kissed his cheek. Just remember, life's too short to spend it any other way than happy. He couldn't afford to be happy. Not for 3 months. Avery, I need to talk to Mom and Rory alone. You're throwing me out of a family meeting? You think I was 10 years old, his younger sister complained. As Elizabeth linked her hand with Avery's, let it go. I'll get everything out of Rory later and fill you in. Once they left, Griffin said, Mom, I don't have any other choice. There's always an option. Not this time. At least not one I didn't cost more than he could afford. Tell her, Griff, Rory said. Griffin placed his hand over his mom's, and the words about why he'd gone on the show, and then his plan tumbled out. Then he detailed the financial costs of breaking his contract and discussing his discussion with Stacy. 3 months and then he would be free. His mother turned to Rory. Her eyes was blazing with motherly irritation. And you knew about this scheme? Don't blame Rory. By the time he knew anything about it, I'd signed the contract. My point in telling you this is to let you know that I've got everything under control and that it's not a big deal. It is to me. I guess I'm old-fashioned, but I don't think you should propose to someone if you're not sincere. Your father and I raised you better than that. We don't have any other choice, Mom, Rory said. The money's gone. It's paid for. Your last treatments. Griffins turned to his brother. I need a favor. You got it, even though you've been a bear the last week. Will you call your Harvard brother for me and ask him to look over my contract? 308, 309, 310. When he answered the bedroom door, dressed in his favorite jeans with holes in the knees and a dark navy Bronco t-shirt, she longed to throw herself in his arms and tell him everything. Instead, she folded her hands in front of her. We should go over the finale details. What I'm really going to do is say goodbye. He stepped aside. Come in. Bad idea, very bad. I'd rather talk in Rory's office. I won't attack you. The cameramen and the sound team are setting up. I don't want to start gossip by being seen coming out of your bedroom. He tossed her impish grin she'd never forget. Things happen in places other than bedrooms. Page 311. The memory of her and Griffin making out on the game room couch flashed in her mind, sending a rush of heat through her. Please, Griffin. She paused, unsure what to say or what to do. He stepped into the hallway. All right, I'll be good. Instead of responding, she turned and walked toward the stairs. The click of his cane and the footsteps told her he was following. What, no snappy comeback? How about how that would be a first? Maggie bit her lip, trying to control the emotions churning inside her, but a sob escaped. She couldn't do this. She had to get away. Never mind. When she tried to leave, Griffin clasped her arm, holding her. What's going on? Are you crying? You never cry. And you never pass up an opportunity to get a dig in. Griffin froze, his hand holding her arm, his mind reeling. Then he guided her down the hallway. When she got sick on the trail, he wondered if she was pregnant, but brushed that thought off. She said the pregnancy test was negative. Now he realized there were too many signs to ignore. Besides getting sick twice, he'd never seen Maggie this emotional. She might get angry with him, but she remained in control. I never saw the results, he's thinking. 310, 311, and 312, and 313. He knew women lied about pregnancies, but lying about not being pregnant, why would Maggie say that she wasn't pregnant if she was? Anger bubbled up inside him. He told her if they created a child that he wanted to be involved, she had no right to keep the news from him. What if she'd been too scared to tell him? The thought softened his anger. Once in Rory's office, he asked, Maggie, is there something you need to tell me? She stiffened and glanced at the floor. He placed his hands under her chin and tilted her head upward. You're a lousy liar. Your eyes give you away. His gaze locked with hers. He caressed her cheek. You have the most expressive, most beautiful eyes I've ever seen. They make me want to do all kinds of wild things with you. Her gaze shot to the door as if she might bolt, but instead she scurried to the leather armchair at the opposite side of the office. We need to talk about the finale, she said in her small voice so shaky. That's all you have to say. Had she not heard him? But why would she believe anything else he had to say that when he spent the last 2 months kissing, caressing other women? She'd think what he was said was meaningless, since he tossed out all kinds of sexual innuendos and compliments to the bachelors this season. Oh, well, we'll talk all right, but not about work. He strolled toward her, leaning heavily on his cane. He refused to let her hide behind her job. He advanced until he stood in front of her. Then he braced his hands on the armchairs and leaned toward her. "You're pregnant." Maggie slid off the chair and ducked underneath his arms and raced out of the room. Page 312, 313. Damn, he botched that. He spent the morning planning what to say, starting how much he loved her and then how much he needed her in his life. But when he suspected she was pregnant, then things went haywire. He clomped after Maggie, calling her name, but she only sped up. By the time he reached the porch, she jumped in the rental car and peeled out of the parking lot. When he crawled into his truck and pulled onto the highway, he couldn't see her car. Where would she go with the finale to start in 3 hours? Her cabin. She had to go there to hide. Unexpected warmth spread through him at the thought of Maggie carrying his child. Since his car accident, he avoided thinking about the future, because when he did, all he saw was the lack of marketable skills and prospects. Maggie believed that he had options, that he could make something of his life. She believed in him. She was the kind of woman who would stand by a man as he worked to achieve his goals. Because of her, he checked into the University of Colorado's admission requirements. 10 minutes later, he banged on her door. "Maggie, if you're in there, please let me in." Nothing. He pulled out his cell phone, but his cell went straight to voicemail. He'd screw up this sure enough. He wouldn't compound his mistake by telling her that he loved her in a phone message. If she wasn't here, where the hell else could she be? Well, he might not know where she was, but now he was damn well knew where she'd be in a few hours. That's page 314. Now here's 315, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and so on and so forth. As Maggie stood in the McAllister living room an hour before the finale, she felt drained emotionally and physically. "Maggie, you can't keep running from me. We need to talk. We need to deal with this." She closed her eyes at the sound of Griffin's voice, but refused to look at him. "I'm busy right now. I need to check lighting, and when I'm done with that, I have to tape the interview part of the show with the finalists." Please, his tender plea wrapped round her heart and squeezed. How would she go through watching him propose to someone else? She motioned to Samantha, "Take over for me." When Maggie and Griffin stood out of the hearing range, she said, "I can't do this. You have a contract to fulfill, remember? Your mother needs this money, and I need my job. You're wearing the sweater I gave you. I knew you would look beautiful in it. It's gorgeous." She ran a hand over the soft wool. "I didn't say the sweater was beautiful. I said you were." "Griffin, don't." She stepped back, but he clasped her arm like he had earlier. This time she pulled free and walked away, praying he wouldn't make a scene. As she sat at the dining room, watching the finalists prattle on about Griffin's good looks, his sense of humor, and how much they loved him, Maggie closed herself off, knowing that was her only one chance to survive this night. The interview section of the show completed, they went to a commercial while she and the finalists returned to the living room. The bachelorettes stood by the fireplace, one dressed in a long, sleek red dress with a slit as high as the elevation. The other wore a form-fitting gold backless gown. Maggie smoothed her hand over her simple black pants. The approaching soft clop of the footsteps paired with a cane allowed Maggie to brace for Griffin's arrival, or so she thought. Dressed in his jeans with holes in the knees, a white snap front shirt, his cowboy boots, his tan Stetson perched on his head, and he appeared confident and strong, but a little underdressed for the situation. "Where's your tux?" "I figured if I'm doing this, I want to be myself. This is who I am. Take it or leave it. But I'm done with playing games." He stepped in front of her. "Where do you want me?" She's thinking in her mind, "With me, forever." 316, 317. She walked with him to a small oak table they positioned a few feet away from the fireplace. One golden key twinkled in the firelight beside a small gray jewelry box containing the 2-carat diamond and emerald engagement ring the show provided. "You'll announce your decision from here." He glanced at her, his eyes sparkling. There were so many things about him she'd miss. Once everyone was in position, she said, "We're back in 30 seconds, so everyone ready." When the camera light came on, Griffin cleared his throat. "I'm sorry to do this to you because you're both great women." Maggie froze. What was Griffin doing? And how could she stop him? Her cell phone vibrated in her pants pocket, her producer, no doubt, wanting to know the same thing. So much for her career as a director. "I can't propose to either of you when I'm in love with someone else." Griffin turned and pointed toward her. "I'm in love with you, Maggie." Knowing he'd lose the money he earned so far, and probably would be sued, he declared his love for her on national TV. Page 318, 319. He risked everything for her, swearing she'd fallen asleep and was dreaming. She watched him pick up the last gold key and limp toward her. She couldn't breathe. Somehow, despite his dating gorgeous women for 10 weeks, he'd fallen in love with her, the country mouse. Maggie, you hold the key to my heart. As he held out the key, one cameraman swiveled to face her, his eyes wide with shock. Join the club. Unsure with the camera staring at her, she smoothed her hand over the soft green sweater Griffin had given her, bolstering her courage. I hear women like grand romantic gestures, he continued, and flashed her a to-die-for smile. She never expected to be on the receiving end of one of those, especially one of those multitude, and much less having the whole wide world watch. That's what studies show. Will you accept this key to my heart? She nodded, not trusting her words to come out in a coherent fashion as she clasped the key in her sweaty fist. The week before my dad died, he said, someday I'd find a woman who wouldn't fall at my feet, and she'd send me on a merry chase. Then he said, if he wasn't around when that happened, Griffin's voice broke at the mention of his father. I was to give her grandmother McAllister's ring. She was mom to 3 boys and was strong enough to keep them in line. He said that's the kind of woman I needed, one I couldn't sweet-talk my way around. The camera focused on them, beaming this private moment to thousands of viewers as Griffin reached inside his shirt pocket and pulled out a ring. Maggie started shaking. I'd get down on one knee, but I'm afraid I'll fall on my butt. What happened to the romantic gestures? I'd call proposing on national TV romantic, wouldn't you? You're proposing? He laughed. Since the ring wasn't enough of a tip-off, Maggie, I love you. You're smart, compassionate, and you keep me on my toes. Will you marry me? How can you do this right now? I've been trying to propose all day, but you kept running away. This is my backup plan. He clasped her cold hand in his. How long are you going to let me stew before you answer me? That's page 318, 319, 320, 321. She still couldn't believe that Griffin had risked everything for her. I love you so much, of course I'll marry you. Griffin slipped the ring, warm from his hand, on her finger. By the time he finished, tears streamed down Maggie's cheeks. She had cried more in the last few weeks than she had in her entire life. She stared at the antique deco ring. A small diamond and white gold rested on each side of the modest center diamond. The sentiments and love behind the ring meant everything to her. It's beautiful. Now we stop talking and kiss me. He laughed. Stop bossing me around. We'll have to talk about that later. Then he wrapped his arms around her, molding his solid body against hers as he kissed her. Everything, the cameras, the crew, the finalists, and her assistants staring at her like she'd stolen the Hope Diamond, faded away. That's it, we're clear, one of the cameramen said. What were you two thinking? The network's going to throw a fit. You can't be serious, Olivia screeched. You and the director? When were you two alone enough to fall in love? How long has this been going on? You'll probably lose your job, Samantha added with a touch of enthusiasm, probably over the director position being open. We had a deal, Stacy sniffed. If you screwed things up for my own show, I'll sue you for everything you've got. Stand in line, Griffin joked. Avery rushed toward them and pushed Stacy aside and enveloped Maggie in a huge hug. When she released her and the younger woman looked at her brother, it's a good thing you proposed. I would have been forced to resort to violence if you hadn't. The noise hammered in Maggie's head. Then a shrill whistle pierced the pandemonium. Everyone faced Nanette. That's enough. You're all acting like a pack of wild dogs. She turned to Rory. Please take these ladies back to their cabins. Yes, ma'am. As Rory and the finalists left, Nanette pointed to the crew huddled together, taking in the entire scene. You start packing up. I want all of you out of here as soon as possible. Then she walked to where Maggie and Griffin stood. Maggie flinched. How could she face Griffin's mother? Surely she thought her the lowest kind of woman for getting involved with a man who was to marry someone else. Page 320, 321, and 322. When Nanette reached them, she clasped Maggie's hand. My dear, I can't tell you how thrilled I am with what happened tonight. You're perfect for Griffin. From the moment you two arrived, I saw how much he loved you. You wouldn't say that if you knew what's going to happen with the show. Griffin told me we'll handle this like every other tough time as a family. Now I'm sure you two have things to discuss. I'm in the kitchen if you need me. Then she kissed Griffin on the cheek. I'm proud of you. Then she kissed Maggie's cheek. And you'll be a fine addition to this family. As Nanette left, the buzz of Maggie's phone broke the silence. She dug out her cell of her pocket and glanced at the number. Her producer. Time to pay the price for what she and Griffin had done. Page 323. When Maggie answered the phone, she paled. Griffin clasped her hand and squeezed. "It's my producer. He wants to speak with the both of us." She tapped the touch screen. "Go ahead, Mark. I've got you on speaker." "What the hell have you two been doing on this season?" "No, don't tell me. I don't want to know. All I'm concerned about is managing this publicity nightmare we're in. The first step is, Maggie, you're fired, effective immediately. I've contacted legal. We're filing lawsuits against both of you tomorrow. You're not to speak to the media about what's happened between the two of you." Page 324. When Maggie ended a call, a new round of tears streamed down her face. Griffin wrapped his arms around her shoulders and glanced at the text, staring at them wide-eyed as they tried to look busy. "Let's go somewhere more private." He led her into the corner of the dining room, away from the commotion and the eavesdropping. "Were you ever going to tell me about the baby? How'd you know?" "You were sick, overly emotional, and passed up a chance to get a dig in at my expense. It took me a while eventually, but I put it together." She stared at the floor. "I didn't know what to do when I discovered I was pregnant. I didn't want to lose my job, and I certainly didn't want you to get sued. I did what I thought was best." "Maggie, girl, take a breath." The last of his anger evaporated. She'd been scared and worried for him and his family. He placed his hand under her chin and gently forced her to meet his gaze. "Are you angry with me?" Her lip trembled. "About the baby? No. About the fact that you lied to me? Yes." Page 325. "Technically, I never lied. I didn't say I was pregnant, only that you wouldn't receive any Father's Day cards. It may not have been the right thing to do, but I had my reasons. There were financial issues, but my parents' marriage weighed on me too. My mother got pregnant when she and my father were dating. He never let her forget he dropped out of college and married her. As years went on, he grew more bitter until he up and left, along with every dime that we had in the bank." The idiot. Being nice. "No wonder you hadn't talked to him in years." Griffin clasped her icy hands in his. "I'm not him, Maggie. I love you. No more lies between us. Don't ever be afraid to tell you the truth." Maggie, you are so blessed. Anyway, page 324, 325. "I don't think my parents would have gotten married if she hadn't gotten pregnant." She pulled away and clenched her hands in front of her. "If you're marrying me because of the baby, tell me. I don't want us making the same mistakes my parents did. We'll work out custody arrangements. If I can find a job in Colorado, I'll move here to make things easier. If I can't find..." Not knowing how else to silence Maggie, he hauled her against him, kissed her, taking his time, enjoying her being so close. The force of how much he loved her and washed over him. "I'm not marrying you because of the baby. Let's face it, I'm not that kind of guy. If I didn't love you, I'd support my child, but that's all. I'm marrying you because I love you and want to spend the rest of my life with you. I'll happily prove it for over the next 50 or so years." She smiled, but then her eyes filled with tears. "What are we going to do?" "I don't know about you. But tomorrow I'm calling Pastor Clockers to see if he can marry us this weekend." "I meant, what are we going to do about the show suing us?" He shrugged and wiped her tears away with his thumb. "They'll figure something out. There's some good news. Other than my 1/6 of the ranch, I'm dang near broke, and as the saying goes, you can't get blood from a turnip." She smiled and shook her head. "There's a silver lining for every cloud, or maybe in this case it's a cloud for every silver lining. I'm not quite sure." "That's my girl." As he held her close, he knew he'd do whatever necessary to provide for his wife and child. His wife and child. He liked the sound of that. "Rory has a lawyer buddy from Harvard, and he couldn't find a loophole in the contract when I talked to him, but he can represent us. We're not giving up without a hell of a fight. If I have to, I'll sick Mom on him. She fights dirty." That's page 326, 327. 3 days later, Maggie sat in the bedroom now that she shared with Griffin, preparing for her wedding. Growing up, most girls dreamed of an elaborate storybook wedding, but Maggie wouldn't change her simple one in the McAllister living room with only his family in attendance for anything. Nanette offered her a wedding gown to Maggie, but she declined, insisting Avery should have the privilege of someday wearing her mother's dress. Instead, Nanette, Avery, and Elizabeth drove to Denver, where they found a strapless satin, A-line dress with an empire bodice that suited her. For Maggie, who'd been too much of a loner since her mother's death, the day had been magical. She never laughed so much as she did when Nanette and Avery regaled her with stories about Griffin. Apparently, he'd always been a handful. She stared in the mirror and adjusted her veil. A knock sounded on the bedroom door. "Come in." Avery, her maid of honor, floated into the room in a short Christmas red dress. "Y'all set?" Maggie nodded and reached for her bouquet of red roses. Griffin gave her that morning. Then the phone rang. She glanced at the number and her stomach dropped. Page 328, 329, and 330. That's the last page, and y'all get a rating. Griffin stood before the fireplace, Rory, his best man, beside him, and swore a herd of horses were stampeding in his stomach. Were you this nervous when you got married? Yep. I kept worrying Elizabeth would change her mind. Thanks for that reassuring. How about giving me some brotherly words of encouragement? Forget it. I'm having too much fun watching you squirm. The rapid click of heels on the winding staircase grew Griffin's gaze. Maggie raced down the stairs with Avery chasing after her and calling her name. She decided to call off the wedding. A whirlwind in white. Maggie stopped in front of him. Her face flushed. That spectacular green eyes sparkling at him offered him some reassurance. This isn't exactly how I imagined our wedding would start. You'll never guess who I just talked to. Honey, there are almost 7 billion people in the world. You're going to have to narrow it down some. Mark called. Your producer? When he released a statement condemning our actions, the message boards went crazy. The tweets flew. According to Mark, the responses are overwhelmingly in support of us. Even though the viewers didn't see me on camera until the finale, they loved the idea of the average girl, someone like them, winning your heart. Women are saying I gave them hope, that they don't have to be beautiful in a size 1 to find love. They want to hear more about our love story. Maggie's voice broke. The viewers are also coming down hard on the show for taking legal action. As a result, they dropped their lawsuits. Griffin stood there, shell-shocked, but thankful. Thank the good Lord for that, Nanette said. That's not all. Maggie's face glowed with barely contained excitement. They want to give you your own show. You know how the Food Network has the show called The Next Food Network Star? Your show would be like that, except you would showcase the up-and-coming rodeo cowboys across the country. They're calling it The Next Rodeo Star. Life was pretty damn good. He'd fallen, but avoided permanently damaging his spine. He might have a limp, but he should walk without a cane soon. The network had dropped the lawsuits, but more importantly, he found a woman that he loved who would stand by him as a partner. He cupped Maggie's face in his hands. Her excitement was a thing of beauty to watch. While all this is great news, can we talk about it tomorrow after the wedding and the wedding night? All right, this once I'll do things your ways. About time I won an argument. What do you think this book's going to get? 30. That good. Must read. So many great parts of this book. And what I like is that the average girl won his heart. Great.